So in this video we'll create another simple form with just two fields, username and email, and we'll make a PHP document wherein we'll try to read the content of that form. Right, so let's get started with the form. We'll say form, and also I'll tell you about the action attribute in a while, so I just mention it so that I remember. Right, and now let's say username is the first field, username, line break, and we'll add a text box. So we'll say input type is equal to text and name is equal to username. Right, again as I said, this particular name will be used in the PHP document to refer to this particular text box. Right, add a line break here. Let's say second text box is your email ID, so we'll just add name and email ID. Say input type is text and we'll say name is equal to email. Let's keep it simple, and closing tag and a line break again, and let's add a submit button. So we'll say input type is equal to submit. The value of the text on the button should be submit, and the name of the button is also submit. Right, so we have a very basic decent form setup here. We close the form tag. Alright, so that is how we make a simple form. Right, so let's quickly see how this form looks in the browser. Right, so there we go, we get a username and email ID, a decent form setup here with the submit button. Now when you click on the button, nothing happens. You can see this text here in the browser. Right, it is trying to connect to some other file because I mentioned the action attribute, but since we did not mention any name of the file, it will not perform any action. So now let's go ahead and make a new PHP file which will actually process this form. So go to file, new, or select this, or press Ctrl N, whatever, and here what we'll do is we'll create another HTML type file. Right, because now we are trying to combine PHP and HTML, so I'll tell you guys how to incorporate the PHP script in an HTML document. Right, so we'll say HTML, we'll have a body tag, or we'll have a head tag first. So let's have a title saying first or processing the form, call it whatever you want to call it, and then close the head tag, open the body tag, leave some space, close the body tag, close the HTML tag. There we go, so we have our basic HTML syntax setup, and I'm going to save it as form.php. Yes. Right, so we have saved another HTML document but with a PHP extension. So what this basically tells the browser is that there is some PHP code in this particular file. Right, so let's go ahead and add the PHP code for processing the form. Now there are two ways to get a data from another HTML document or a form. Right, so we made a form here. We have two values, username and email ID. There are two ways to transfer this particular data into another document on the server. Right, so one is called the get method and one is called the post method. Now there is a difference between the two. In the get method, it is private, right? It is not shared with anything else. But in the post method, what happens is that it appears on the URL bar. So as you can see, this thing is the get method. Right, everything appears in the URL bar. On the other hand, in the post method, nothing will be visible here. You will not be able to find out whatever content it is. Right, so since this is a form, we need to maintain some privacy, so we'll be using the post method. Right, so the syntax of both of them is something like this. First we'll say welcome, or heading, not, let's say h3, and we'll say welcome. And now what we'll do is we'll try to display the details. So we'll start a PHP script, PHP, and we'll try to echo the username. So for using the post format, what we do is, this is the syntax, dollar underscore, and in the square brackets we write the name of whatever we want to print. Say username was the r this name, right? So it was username, so we'll print username here, and to specify which method it is, we'll say post just outside the square bracket, and obviously everything ends with a semicolon and a question mark and a greater than symbol, right? So this is a script. This will basically use the username and print it here. Now let's mention that we are displaying your username, so we'll say your user name is, and we'll display this, right? Now this can also be done in a paragraph, but just for the sake of explaining, I was right. So this is a proper valid HTML tag, right? So this is how you incorporate the PHP script in an HTML document, right? So now let's go ahead and add the action button. Now in the action we need to add a file name, so we'll say form.php because we saved it with the name form.php, right? So what we need to do is we need to make sure that both these files are in the same folder, right? That is only when this file will be called automatically. If it is in a different folder, you need to mention the entire path. As you can see, I users upkeep desktop form.php, something like that, right? So since in our case it is in the same folder, we don't need to worry about it, so we'll just call it form.php. Now another thing is the email ID, so let's go ahead and add the email ID thing here as well. So what we'll do is we'll use a post method or a get method for this one. So we'll say your email ID is, and we'll add another script. There is no limit to the number of scripts which you can add, so you can add any number of scripts you want in a HTML document. Again we'll say underscore get, and in the brackets we'll say email. It is not recommended that we do that, or rather do this, because the privacy should be maintained while processing a form. But just for the sake of demonstrating both get and post, I'm trying to use both of them in a single document. So to make it a bit understandable, let's add a few line breaks, even a horizontal rule, right? So now the PHP document is done, and we have added this action here, form.php. So that is all about the text part. Now we need to save it in the htdocs folder, which is in the xampp directory, right? So let's go ahead, save as, and navigate to the HMPP directory, which will be in your C drive. In my case it is the I drive. You will find the XAMPP folder right here. Go inside htdocs folder and save it in the htdocs folder with the same extension .html, right? So you can either write it or select it from a list. So I'll select it here and I'll save it. Same with the form.php, because I said that we need to save both of these in the same folder, right? So again go to the same folder, local disk I xampp htdocs. In your case it will be C xampp htdocs, right? And it is a .php file, so I save it like that. Now what we need to do is we need to start the xampp service. So I'll search xampp and I launch the control panel. So I need to start only the Apache server for processing my PHP file, right? Just wait for a while till it starts. So it turned green, which means it's running. So let's go to our web or Firefox now, and again, as we did in the PHP part, go to localhost, open the localhost directory and type the name of the document, right? So the name was index.html. So there we go, this is now open. I'll enter a username, I'll enter some email ID, and I'll click the submit button. So when I click the submit button, it goes to another page Now as you can see, the username and email ID are there in the address bar as well. So your username is this. Now we have some issue here, undefined index, we probably misspelled something, and the email ID is agibadani@yahoo.in, right? So as you can see, this is the process data of our form. I've entered the name and email ID in the form. When I click submit, it is showing my username, a horizontal rule as we mentioned, and my email ID, right? So that is how you process data, and that is how you incorporate PHP scripts in an HTML document.